Ahoy, mateys, and welcome back to Captain Keaton. Today I am joined by a very special guest, a returning guest, and one who very much enjoys the arts of tea. It is none other than Games with Tea. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to this episode.
For those who missed it, Games with Tea joined me to talk about NES Zelda, the first Zelda game. In retrospect, how do you feel about that episode and just kind of your appearance and appearances here on the channel?
I really like everything, the Zelda-related topics that you've been covering, all very informative and just really happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, it was really interesting to get your perspective. I know that the first game is maybe a bit out of your element, but I appreciate you for, helping me commence this journey.
It's been fun.
So you have a great YouTube channel over here, Games with Tea. Can you tell the viewers a little bit about what's going on over there, what you do, and some projects you're working on recently?
Yeah, primarily just, all gaming related stuff, trying to come up with some new unique topics that are not really covered, by the general, typical topics that we see on YouTube, sort of kind of what you're doing with your channel. And so, yeah, I do a lot of that stuff, but also some of the more generic Switch and PlayStation related coverage, mostly on modern consoles.
You're also a big fan of RPGs.
Oh, 100%. The best genre in the world.
Is Zelda an RPG? You don't have to answer that. I don't want people hating you for your answer. So,
yes, no. Yes, no, yes.
Yes, okay. What are some RPG/games that you're playing lately?
I just beat the final and very challenging boss in Black Myth Wukong, a game that I don't know if you've heard about or not, yesterday. And it took me forever to beat it, but I'm really happy to have done so.
Well done. What are you playing that on? PS5?
Yes, I played it on the PS5 and absolutely loved it. Very challenging though, so whoever wants to try it out, be warned, be careful.
I hope it comes to Xbox. I don't have the PS5. The PS5 still manages to elude me.
Yeah, it probably will come to Xbox eventually, and it's definitely worth playing.
Yeah, sounds cool. Everything I've heard about it's great. So, yeah, do you like it as kind of like one of those Souls type games?
So people like to compare it to Souls-like, but I disagree with most of those people. I think it's its own genre. But it's like, if you want to compare it in terms of difficulty, it's definitely a difficult game, but I would not classify it as a Souls-like. There are plenty of difficult games out there, the Mega Mans, the classics out there. They're not Souls-like, they're difficult. And I would put Wukong as its own class, a difficult game, but not really Souls-like.
What makes it difficult?
The boss encounters, lots of bosses, very challenging. You have to be quick on your reflexes. Just a very, skill heavy game.
Any particular bosses stand out to you?
A lot of the bosses for the end chapters are very challenging, so they're there for a reason. And obviously the final boss is quite challenging.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. It looks cool to me. It's kind of like Boss Rush-esque.
Yes, I would definitely classify it as a boss rush in a good way, but there's also a lot of other elements going on. A really nice story, beautiful music, and just overall pretty rich with exploration.
Okay. And lastly, do you see any link in Wukong or vice versa?
I actually kind of do, because both Link and Wukong kind of have that sense of exploration, like I just mentioned, lots of hidden areas and lots of quote unquote dungeons, although I wouldn't classify the Wukong as a more dungeon heavy game, but it kind of does a little bit of that in a good way. And yes, I do kind of see that.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to tell me he was born in a forest, but that works too. Cool. All right. So we're going to get into it. If you want to hear about Games with Tea, you can go ahead and subscribe to his channel, and you can also go and listen to the other episode that we did here on Captain Keaton. He did talk about his history with the Zelda series. Today, we're going to focus more so on Link's Awakening, a Zelda classic that has been released and re-released and re-released. What is your history, Games with Tea, with The Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening? What was your first exposure to it?
My first exposure was with the remake that came out on the Switch. I had not heard about the game, but with the Switch, when the Switch came out, I made it a mission to play as many Zelda titles as I could. And I really wanted to get into the series because it was kind of one of those things that I had not played a bunch of Zelda. It's a really well-known series, very popular amongst many players. And I was just missing out. So I really wanted to play it, and Switch was the perfect time to do so, and I did.
Okay, sadly, I'm not one of the people who've played the Switch remake, but I grew up with the Game Boy game, so I will come back to more Switch-related stuff later for sure, as far as, like, I'll target specific questions at you, but do you have any interest in playing the Game Boy versions?
I did. So I did try it out. I didn't play too much, but I really appreciated. So one of the things that I really enjoy about that, about these remakes and the original versions, is kind of going back and forth and seeing the faithful representation of what the original was. And I think that they nailed it with this game. So I went back and played Link's Awakening on the Game Boy Color, which is available through the Switch online, whatever it's called, program. And it is a very faithful translation of the remake, or I should say the remake is a very faithful translation of the original. And I really enjoyed that about it.
I'm going to have to correct you. DX is also a remake. So it's a very faithful remake of a remake.
Oh, wow. Okay, there you go.
I guess
so,
you could
yeah,
say
even
the original Deluxe, the original DX, because DX added things like the Color Dungeon, which is also present in the Switch remake. But, semantics.
Yes. Well, okay, there you go. I learned something today.
So you played it, I guess it was like 2019 when it came out?
I believe so. It was a while back, yes.
What was your experience with it, with it then?
I really enjoyed and appreciated. This was my first, I don't know how we describe it, as a top-down 2D, 3D, whatever the terminology is, Zelda experience with some really cool dungeons, and I loved the progression system. And actually, I really enjoyed the story of this particular Zelda game.
Yeah, and I guess what's interesting is you had the Breath of the Wild as a point of reference. So did that affect your experience with it at all?
No, not at all. I mean, Breath of the Wild and Skyward Sword were games that I'd also played. I don't know which one came first, Skyward Sword or Link's Awakening, but I had played Skyward Sword on the Wii. However, they did not. So one of the things that I really wanted to play was, let me see if I get this right, A Link to the Past on the SNES, a game that I've been dying to play. I've heard so many people talk about that. Never got a chance to do it. So Link's Awakening was kind of my way of diving into this style of gameplay, which is a overhead 2D, typical classic Zelda adventure. At least I think it is.
Yeah. So was this your first top-down Zelda game?
It was.
That might make two of us. I think this might have been mine as well. I'm not sure.
And I must say, a great one.
Yeah. So you played through it. You enjoyed it for its story elements, and I guess just kind of the gameplay itself as well. How did it affect your understanding of the Zelda series, and I guess even just the genre of top-down?
It gave me a new insight and honestly made me realize what I was missing out on. I think of all the classic games, and I know that I played the remake, I understand that, but I've always had a bit of a hesitance towards going back and reliving some of the moments of past with some of these Zelda games. But it really made me appreciate, and I can only imagine what it felt like playing for the first time on your Game Boy or Game Boy Color, wherever whoever played it for the very first time. It's such a well-made game.
Yeah, I'm curious. We can kind of talk about it, but the original top-down games are kind of like more panel based, right? You move panel to panel. I don't know if like me describing that is making sense, but like
It is. It is. Yeah.
The main thing that the remake changes, I would think, aside from the visual style, is that the camera moves with Link.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So would you say that it still gives you an authentic top-down feel?
100%. It doesn't feel like a classic game as far as, it has these quality of life improvements, or I won't call them improvements, but certain things that we've come to expect from this day and age of gaming. But as far as the overall feel of what a classic Zelda game must have felt like, I never experienced it, but must have felt like, it definitely gave me that experience.
Yeah, and at this point, you've dabbled in some of the older ones anyway, so you have that point of reference. I may just be overanalyzing, or just curious, I guess, because I mean, I'm still in a position where I need to play the remake. So, okay. Since 2019, what has your relationship been like with Link's Awakening / other top-down Zelda games?
That has been my only relationship with Zelda games, but it's been a great relationship. I consider it one of my favorite Zelda games, and I think it's something, like I said, I'm so glad to have experienced, and it's kind of in a way made me a little bit hesitant to play the classics, because part of me wants Nintendo to make these games, newer versions of these games, Link to the Past, whatever the case may be, so I can experience them that way. I know that's not the preferred way that people like to play them, but those types of styles work for me. So I'm really, really glad to have played it, and definitely it's one of my favorite Zelda games.
Okay, interesting. You feel like the remake sets you up so that you need to play like more remakes, I guess.
Yes, I'm a big fan of remakes. People may complain about them, but I'm 100% on board with remakes, especially for classic games that may be a little outdated, may need a little love. That's obviously debatable, but I certainly sit on the fence of, hey, more remakes for classic games, the better.
If this game never got a remake, do you think you would have played it?
No, I don't think I would have, if I'm being honest.
Sure. Why is that?
It's just something that I don't really go back and do. It's kind of my gameplay choices, I guess, if you will. I tend to stick towards modern games, and while I would love to try out some of the classics, I feel like I don't know. It's just maybe I don't have the patience to look through some of the intricacies or details of how to progress in some of the older games that can be, I must say, cryptic at times. So you need some sort of a guide or something. And back in the day, we used to have guides on like a book style guide, which I preferred. I'm kind of old school in that way, at least, where I would look at a book or a guide or a manual and go through. But now, using a phone or something, I don't enjoy it at all. So I'd rather just have a game in front of me and naturally learn things or naturally progress through things within the game itself. And I feel like modern gaming does it a little bit better than classics.
Sure. I can definitely think of a couple moments where I'm getting a bit lost playing Link's Awakening, like blind or for the first time in years. They're few and far between, but I mean, also don't like playing with my phone. The point of playing the game is to get away from the phone for me, so I understand that perspective. And I you know me, I'm a big retro gamer, so I like the classics. I'm not offended like you don't. I get it. In fact, that's probably more common of a take than I would probably attribute to it. But I think it's an important one. I think people ought to understand that, like, generally, like, while these services exist and, we're all paying for it, we all have I think most of us download the Super Nintendo one. I don't think most people even download the Game Boy one. I think it's just a novelty for a lot of people. And so while I love them, I love the classics, I can understand that playing the original way or even the emulated way is not always the best way.
Yeah, let me just clarify something as far as the classics are concerned. So I do enjoy my classics, but more of the linear style games, not necessarily the ones where you're adventuring around. So the Mega Mans, the side scrolling games and stuff like that, or the Kirby's, games that don't require a lot of exploration. I really do enjoy those.
Okay. I could see that. What makes the remake less like that?
That's a good question, because I really never played the original, so I don't know for sure, but I don't remember any place in particular where I got stuck. Now, that just could very well have been the case when I was playing Link's Awakening, but yeah, I unfortunately I have no way of comparing the two, but I definitely felt like with this remake I never got stuck anywhere, which is always an enjoyable experience to me.
Well, I hate to sell you on the classics, but this is a 1-to-1 remake, so I think you got no excuse there.
There you go. Yeah, I'm trying to dig myself out of that. I can't.
That's okay. I get it. I mean, hey, even like looking at a Game Boy screen, maybe even some of the bombable walls are not as like readily apparent. Like, I can think there are some very subtle clues for the exploration. And I could think of a couple locations that do that for me. But we'll ask you about your experience with the environs, the narrative, the everything of Link's Awakening. Mr. Games with Tea, what are your overall thoughts, feelings, and memories with the game?
Positive, and positive. Very positive feelings and memories with the game, from the opening scene to the way the game starts, the way the game begins, how it gets you into the Zelda moment, I guess, if you will, really right off the bat, starting off with a shield and sword, the classics for Link, and just the overworld. Really appreciated the design, all the details within the overworld, kids playing. It felt like a world or a village, I should say, that you wanted to be part of. Plus, of course, the dungeons were really well designed. I mean, I'm not sure. So I never made it. I never tried the dungeon on the original game, so I can't speak to that. But the dungeon designs over here in this remake were really well made. Had some really interesting and fun boss encounters for the most part, and just overall lots of secrets to discover, and a great enjoyable experience that doesn't really take that long to complete.
Any particular dungeons stand out to you?
I'm trying to remember some. So a lot of them, I can't remember the names of them, but I remember dungeons by some of the bosses. There was, I guess, a bird that I remember in one of the later dungeons that I encountered. That was a fun battle. The final boss I remember being a shadowy figure, but that's after you get, go through the egg and you play the instruments and you go in there. That boss was pretty memorable. Some of the earlier bosses where you're targeting, some chain link's tail. I don't remember what the boss was called. That was a fun experience. So I can't remember the dungeons vividly, but I remember segments of them, and I just remember overall, the puzzle solving elements, collecting an instrument at the end, or I believe collecting an instrument at the end, which is part of the story, and fighting some bosses along the way.
You know how I know you're a Wukong guy?
How?
Because you told me all about, when I asked for dungeons, you told me about bosses.
Yes. Well, I mean,
It's a good thing.
to be fair, Zelda has some amazing bosses too. So
Yeah, to your credit, I was thinking back to what bosses I remembered before I went and replayed it, and I can only think of one. And that Eagle Tower one with the flying eagle, that is a great moment, and it is a great boss. I for some reason it just, maybe I hadn't played it enough, like in my childhood, that like that one stuck out to me. But you're right, like there are great bosses and moments in a lot of these dungeons. And actually one thing that I think would help is understanding of some of the classics. For instance, the last dungeon is Turtle Rock. Turtle Rock is kind of omnipresent in a lot of these games. It's in Link's Awakening. It's in Link to the Past. Then it's in Link's Awakening. It's in Link Between Worlds. It's in the Link's Awakening remake. So you kind of start to see some of those connections, I guess. And in some senses, this is kind of a Link to the Past sequel. So a couple of the bosses, I won't say they're recycled, but they're remade, I guess, for a different era. So Moldorm, the Armos, the Lon Mola, those are all beginner bosses in Link to the Past. Okay. I think that also helps with keeping some of the things memorable.
Well, yeah, the clown with the fire or juggler or whatever, he's throwing fireballs at you. I don't know what his name is. I remember that boss. I don't know the specifics. I'm not. I played this game so long ago that I can't remember the names of these bosses, but there's some memories that do stick out because I enjoyed the game a lot.
I don't think they don't really name them in the game. Like you have to go out of your way to look that stuff up, and I think that kind of gets into some territory where it's like, okay, mega fan, like I am a mega fan, so I can name a lot of this stuff, but I would understand not remembering names because they never introduced them to you in the first place. But when you bring up the Bottle Grotto Clown in a Jar, it makes me remember some of the bosses for the wrong reasons. One of my least favorite in this game is a face at the face shrine that just appears in the floor and then just throws pots and stuff at you. And
I remember that. Yep.
Like it's a little better than I remembered. Like he's throwing bottles and floor panels at you, which is a mechanic that you see in the game. The floor starts to rise and then comes at Link. I guess I just think it's like you could have done maybe a little more, a little better. What do I know? So tell me about how you feel about this whole concept of the Windfish, the Ballad of the Windfish, Koholint Island, and waking up the Windfish. What did it mean to you when you played it?
I was surprised, and I loved the the way at least the game portrays how the windfish kind of attracts you towards it because it needs to be awakened, from what I understand. So the events that occur, you being washed up on the island and being part of a dream and having to free the windfish to wake him up because from what I understand, the dreams have taken, or there's some nightmares that have formed in the dream and they're causing issues, and he's been put into a slumber. I really thought it was very, very creative, and something obviously I did not, maybe other people did see it coming, but I certainly didn't. And it's one of the reasons why I really appreciated the story. I thought it was good. And I people sort of describe this as, well, at least I've heard some opinions being, are you really a good guy in this game, a bad person, or, would you have done this? Yes, the answer is yes. I would have done this. It's part of a dream, so you have to realize that the game is telling you or is asking for your help, and what you're doing is not really real. But there was also another really cool moment that we can discuss if you want to later that I wanted to highlight.
Let's do it now.
Okay, so yeah, one of the coolest things within the story that I think is a secret. I didn't know about this. So as you know, a lot of times when I beat a game, I like to go back and look up some of the lore behind it. So I remember back, and this stuck with me, that the female character, I forget his name, that is with Link early
Marin.
on from the very beginning, Marin, yeah. So she wishes that she could turn into a bird and fly off this island and go explore what is beyond the sort of never-ending sea. And towards the end, they show that as this fish is now awakened, there's a bird flying in the sky, which is, I'm assuming, a depiction of her as she leaves. So that was a really cool moment, I think, within the story.
Yeah, I think that the Switch one has like a hidden ending or something. I don't like. There's a real ending.
Oh, did I just spoil it for you?
A little bit,
Sorry.
but that's okay. That's an interest. I've played this game to the credits many times, and I never kind of put that together. I just thought like the windfish is a big whale in the sky. Like that's a spoiler, but oh well.
Yeah, the windfish. So that's a secret ending. I think you have to get no damage or something against certain bosses or whatever. It's like a hard to get ending. I don't know if it exists in the original or not, but I thought that was a really cool moment.
It's a good question. I actually don't know. Have to do more research. But I do think that scene with Marin it's definitely one of the most memorable for a lot of people. And where she's sitting at the beach and it's so lofty because you're like gung ho. I'm on an adventure. I got to get Marin. She's got to wake up the walrus, play the ocarina for the thing. And meanwhile, she's just like, do you ever just stare at the sea and wonder what's on the other side? And it just catches you so off guard. It's playing some of the iconic music from the game. And, Link to the Past has great music. I mean, as does Zelda 2 and NES Zelda. But I think this may be one of the strongest instances where they start to characterize songs in the game or in a Zelda game in general. In Link to the Past, yeah, you play the flute and then the rooster comes picks you up. But like the Ballad of the Windfish and even the concept of instruments like that you're getting from dungeons build this narrative of like, I don't know, something to do with music. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, me too. And the remake definitely enhances the music, in my opinion. I've listened to both. Now, there's this classicness of listening to the music on the original Game Boy while playing on it, or whatever, the remake on the Game Boy Color. But on the actual Switch, the music is fabulous.
Sure, I believe it. Yeah, it's orchestral, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Sounds worth it. I really got to look into procuring me a copy. Any other like meanings that you took away from the game?
Not necessarily. I just like the overall. Like I said, it's a story that I don't think, and I'm obviously not the most Zelda knowledgeable person out there. I've just played some of the modern ones, but I think the story I appreciated, sort of moving away from the typical Zelda storyline, at least from what I've seen with the modern games, and giving us something different, like quite different in terms of its narrative. I just really appreciated that.
How do you feel about all the Mario crossovers?
I didn't mind them. I thought I would bring that up, but the Chomp is the one that really stands out, I guess. Chain Chomp, there you go, that's his name, and some others. I don't mind them at all. I do like to have things in their own worlds. in a way, it doesn't mess up your experience, but it wasn't. It was subtle. It was not something in your face. Like if they were Mario in there or something, I think it would have lessened the overall enjoyment of the game. But some of the more sort of guest characters that show up in Mario games, I didn't mind that as much. But I'm sure purists probably mind that.
I've never heard a complaint about it, but that is an interesting perspective. Like keep characters in their own universe. So I appreciate that perspective. I think I agree. I think it is subtle. I don't know. What do you think?
Yes, I do think so.
Okay.
So it's not, they're there, but they're really not part of the overall adventure as much.
Yeah, almost footnotes. Well, I don't know. I mean, the chain chomp's kind of like integral in progression, but then I agree. I think like what is it like Goombas or just happen to be underground and piranha plants and thwomps. The chain chomps are cool. You see the Shy Guys. It's like half and half. It's like half Mario enemies, half Zelda enemies. So I think it was an interesting footnote. But yeah, no, I think this is predominantly a Zelda game first before it tries to be some kind of hybrid.
Oh yeah, 100%. I definitely agree with that.
We can now talk about your area of expertise. That is the Nintendo Switch Remake. So first, let's just talk about what are the various releases. Link's Awakening came out on the Game Boy in 1993, the Game Boy Color as Link's Awakening DX in 1998, and finally the Nintendo Switch in 2019. So, do you think the Nintendo Switch Remake is a good remake of Link's Awakening?
No, I don't think it's a good...
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a good remake. I think it's a great remake. I think it's really, really well made. Now that you told me the date 2019, now I realize that it's been quite some time since I played it. And for me to remember a lot of the moments, and I know they're not vivid memories, but to remember the moments of a game that I played almost 5 years ago tells me that I really enjoyed the game. And it's definitely something like it kind of stands out. It sticks out to you from the very beginning. I noticed that when I was playing the Game Boy Color version, that the opening cutscene is not there. So they added some cinematics to the Switch version that really sort of bring in a little bit more context to the story, to the plot, that I appreciated once I looked at the Game Boy Color version. And then from there, just the overall worlds, environments, the colors just stand out so much. I mean, Nintendo does an amazing job with their art, with their design, and the colors really pop in this game. And just the world feels so lively. It's a really, really well-made game.
I just want to say with the intro scene, they do have the capsize scene and then Marin strolls up on Link on a beach. It's probably not as memorable because the Switch one is animated, but it is there. But I think that's important when thinking about the game, what makes it memorable, because clearly the Game Boy Color one was not memorable for you. So what are the hallmarks of a good/great remake for you then?
I think the hallmarks for me personally is staying true to the original content. I think that is a very important factor for people that are looking to enjoy a remake from what they remember playing back in the day. Now, obviously, that's not applicable to me, but I do appreciate that to where you can actually, oh yeah, I remember this scene back when I was playing it on my Game Boy. It kind of brings back those nostalgic memories. I think that is a very important factor whenever designing a remake. But at the same time, I really also appreciate when they make any quality of life changes. Now, once again, I cannot relate to the experience of past, but any type of quality of life improvements, whether it be better fluid controls, the scrolling of the screens, like you mentioned on some of the older games because of limitations that you don't have as much over here, or just in general, tweaks and designs to make your navigation through the game a lot smoother. And like you said, some of the dungeon colors, the way they choose, so it's a little bit easier to navigate. I definitely do appreciate that, and I think are keys to having remake or keys for remakes.
There's a delicate balance of like, am I providing a improved experience and also adding something that will be appreciated, and am I changing the experience too much? This is like that weird territory of like faithful remake, like it almost remaster in a sense, but I can understand that the contents were remade for the Switch, but so little is really changed. Originally, I was really bothered by that because like I felt like, why would I pay $60 for something I can already play? But in thinking about it more, I've come to understand that that's okay, especially considering that the Game Boy Color version is essentially the same thing. It's the same game, but just with color and like a couple unique novelties added. So I think I can appreciate the remake in a way that I couldn't back in the day.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with, people that have experienced the game, or somebody like myself who is experiencing it for the very first time as well. So it's kind of that fine balance between, keeping things faithful but also catering to a newer audience, which I think they accomplished quite masterfully in this case. Now, another example is some of the Final Fantasy VII remakes that kind of veer off from the classic original. Some appreciate that, while others do not. This game does not do that, to my knowledge. But it's an interesting debate whether to, how much of the original properties or identity do you want to keep for the newer release?
Are there any other Zelda games that you would like to see get remade in terms of priority?
Link to the Past. my one game. Oh, and your couple of your favorites, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. I have multiple times tried to play Ocarina of Time on the N64, and I really, really enjoy the game, but I really struggle with the controls on it, the 3D controls. So in the modern day and age where we have the right analog stick to kind of control your camera, I think it's severely missing on the N64 version. It's something that I struggle to look past. So I would definitely, those three games, if they came out with a release for them, I would play them probably day one.
What would you want a Link to the Past remake to look like?
Pretty much like they did with Link's Awakening remake, just bright, colorful, beautiful dungeons. I've of course not played Link to the Past, so I can't tell you exactly, the intricate details about it. But just more in vein of what they did with Link's Awakening, make it a very pleasing, in terms of visuals, in terms of music, in terms of story, quality of life. I'm assuming quality. Well, it does appear like there are a lot of quality of life upgrades with this one. So I would like to see that with Link to the Past. Now, once again, if Link to the Past, a lot of people will tell me it's perfect as it is.
Sure.
And I understand that, but I'm just saying, if the game was released, that's what I would like to see.
Yeah, I'm open-minded. I think that if it can bring in new fans, then why not? And if it's faithful to its origins, I think it just has the Link to the Past has an interesting precedent of already being kind of a masterpiece for its time. And some people may feel that a remake could only do damage. Whereas with Link's Awakening, it's like, all right, well, we're making a Game Boy game, remade for a modern console. So it could be a console experience. So like there's less room for damage, I guess.
That is true. I just think that Nintendo handles these projects overall pretty thoughtfully. And while there's always that chance that, Link to the Past can potentially be ruined, it would be kind of surprising if it did actually happen, because I think they are very meticulous about maintaining that balance.
Yeah, they'd really have to drop the ball. I mean, the framework's entirely there. So, but I do think seeing how well received the Link's Awakening remake is, they basically have the blueprints to do this for any top-down 2D Zelda game. So that's pretty interesting. And Ocarina of Time remake, that's like my baby. I can't just like hand that over to them just yet, because I don't want them screwing that up. That would be devastating. But at the same time, it got the 3DS remake, which I enjoyed. So I gotta calm down a little bit. I do think that it would be cool if we got I've seen some of those Zelda Ocarina of Times in the Unreal Engine, and they look phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, not too huge of a shift, because I think Ocarina of Time is a pretty solid game as is. But like a few quality of life improvements, like the camera angle and stuff like that, I think would do wonders to its popularity. Not that it's not popular already, but just introduce it to more modern, quote unquote, modern gamers like myself.
Sounds good, man. Okay. Do you have any Zelda comparisons that you'd like to make for Link's Awakening?
Unfortunately, not really. I mean, so I've talked about my experiences with Zelda before, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself. But Link's Awakening, Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom are the four Zelda games that I've completed. And Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are very similar. However, Skyward Sword, Link's Awakening are quite different experiences. If you wanted to say three different experiences, it would be Tears of the Kingdom, Link's Awakening, and Skyward Sword. And I think Link's Awakening for me is, at least the way I perceive Zelda, as some of the, in classic ways. I know it's not a classic, it's a remade game. But if you wanted to talk about classic Zelda, I think is the best representation of a classic Zelda. Now, whether people prefer the modern 3D Zeldas, maybe like Ocarina of Time or whatever, that's also a great choice and a wonderful debate to have. But I really enjoyed the classic Zelda in this game, and definitely it was a worthwhile experience.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think your perspective is important, because it shows that, especially somebody coming into the Zelda series maybe a little after the fact, after some of its initial hype, a lot of people did come on at Breath of the Wild. And I think that we ought to understand, what is it like for somebody in that position? Not to say you hadn't dabbled in some Zeldas before, but I think that was kind of your onboarding point.
100%. Breath of the Wild was my first complete Zelda experience, and from there I made it a point to play everything that I could, at least newer releases that came out, because I really enjoyed it.
Okay. Do you have any topics that you'd like to bring up?
I think we've covered pretty much everything that there is to cover. I would definitely recommend people to try out, including yourself, to try out the remake if possible, if time permitting and all that. It's definitely an experience that I think a lot of people would enjoy, especially if they're like me and kind of shy away from older titles for whatever reason. I'm kind of strange that way. But if you're looking for a modern coat of paint on a game that represents good classic Zelda adventuring, then definitely check out Link's Awakening Remake on the Switch or wherever you want to, I guess.
Excellent. Okay, cool. We'll consider that final thoughts for the game as well. All right, Mr. Games with Tea. Time to prompt you with a fun little task. Link has fallen asleep and he's in a nightmare. And you get to say something to him to try help or hurt. I don't know what you want to say to Link. But what would you say to Link as he's dreaming in this nightmare?
Wake up, Link. I don't know.
Yo, get the hell
I can't think of a, or I would do the classic Ocarina of Time. Hey, listen, or whatever, something like that. There you go.
No, Navi! That sounds like a nightmare. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Games with Tea. Check him out.
Thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it.